Today's episode, we're really going to focus on this announcement that was made. What was it, last Friday, last Thursday?
Friday.
Yeah, last Friday of, this high level state takeover of the EA reservoir. And just a tiny bit of background, the EA reservoir specifically is, a 50-50 partnership with the Army Corps of Engineers. And the governor announced essentially that, the state is going to take over some parts of it. I'm going to read the exact statement made, and then this whole episode should probably be pretty short. We're just going to kind of dissect it a little bit and kind of discuss what this means for the future. So I'll start out with the governor's statement, and it reads, quote, "Today, Governor Ron DeSantis announced a landmark agreement between the state of Florida and the U.S. Department of the Army that allows Florida to lead the construction of federally funded projects under the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan and expedite the completion of the EA reservoir." And there's a couple bullets in that same announcement graphic that states, expedite completion from 2034 to 2029. Florida takes on inflow and outflow pump station construction to EA reservoir. Florida focuses on Blue Shanty Flowway construction to get water fully flowing to Florida Bay. The Army expedites funding, cuts red tape, and grants Florida authority to manage Everglades projects. Real quick, Chris, can you kind of, for people that are just a little, maybe they don't know, and I honestly wasn't too familiar, it says Florida focuses on Blue Shanty Flowway. What is that, just visually? Where is that?
That's basically at the bottom of the system that where water has to move through in order to get to Florida Bay. So you've got kind of, Everglades is compartmentalized. Everglades Restoration reconnects that system that's disconnected. And at the top, you've got this plug that, not enough water's moving out of Lake Okeechobee South. That's what the EAA, or the Everglades Reservoir, does, is it takes that water, cleans it, sends clean water into the Everglades. Blue Shanty Flowway allows that water to move all the way through the system to Florida Bay ultimately.
Gotcha. And was that, so it's in this bullet, was that something that the Army Corps was in charge of, and now the state's taking over that one specifically?
Yeah, I mean, many of those, I don't know the exact details, and I think that's something that as we go through this process, we don't know everything, and there are questions around it. But the main thing is that Everglades Restoration is a partnership between the state and federal governments, not only in the form of funding, but in the actual form of execution. And so I'm not sure what the roles were there, but the idea here is that the state generally can move much faster to get these projects done, just because of less bureaucratic red tape or less time between permitting and approval and things like that. And
Gotcha.
so, yeah, this is these projects together, again, with the inflows into the Everglades Reservoir. You've got to be able to move more water out of Lake Okeechobee, so that involves widening and deepening some of those supply canals.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Obviously when this news dropped, to me personally, it was almost kind of a surprise. When I first joined Captains, the governor was on fire with Everglades restoration projects. It seemed like he was, constantly, there was so much hype around Everglades restoration. It was in his conversations constantly, all these press conferences. And things were getting done, at a rapid pace the first few years. And it was fantastic, groundbreakings, ribbon cuttings at an unprecedented pace. But then, over the last couple years, maybe 1 to 2 years, I feel, and maybe I'm wrong, but I have just felt that I haven't felt the same energy from the governor with Everglades restoration. It's almost, I haven't, seen him in action around all of our issues, everything we've been doing. Obviously as the governor, you have a lot more things on your plate other than Everglades restoration. But considering in his inaugural address, he pretty much ran on Everglades restoration. And the past couple of years, from my personal point of view, I feel like he hasn't been maybe as involved as he once was. And, to me, it's a little, I have to ask the question, I wonder why. especially because, he champions this EA reservoir. We know that is the most important project. But this rock mine issue that we've, discussed for months now could seriously jeopardize that project. And you would think we would hear something from him. That's like his baby as much as it is ours, that EA reservoir. And we haven't heard much. We haven't heard anything really at all from the governor's point of view on this rock mine. And like I said, so many other priorities. So who even knows if he knows about it? But I guess what my first question here is, Jess, when we first got this news, I just kind of told you my initial reaction. But what was like your initial reaction when you saw this? Were you surprised? Did you see this coming? Like, just kind of talk us through that.
Well, yeah, let me take that in a couple of pieces, because first I want to address what you described as the way you personally see this. I think what you're seeing, what you saw at the beginning of Governor DeSantis' term, is he absolutely has that unwavering commitment to Everglades restoration. He's, put the money where his mouth is on that, over $8 billion, and that money has been critical, crucial, super important. But as we've reaching this next phase, we are seeing now in the form of that rock mine that there is clear and present danger in continued threats. It's not just about the money anymore. Now it's about these threats, and the rock mine being one of them. Big Sugar, they are always scheming, always conniving, always looking for their next entry point, and with this rock mine, I mean, this is their next foray into how do we, assume control of the water. I think Chris also has a good way of, he and I have talked about this, and he has a good way of looking at it and understands. I think he maybe can jump in here and talk about,
Yeah. What do you think, Chris?
I mean, you have to look at the kind of the climate that Governor DeSantis entered this in. In the very beginning, Sugar was in very much in favor and control with, the legislature, the South Florida Water Management District. There was a lot of opportunity for the governor to come in and beat back those threats that existed then. After that initial thing, and that's when that flurry that you felt in the beginning, everything from, the passage of Senate Bill 10 before Governor DeSantis, when he was still in Congress, before he became the governor, to then the threat with the extension of the leases to what Jess referred to earlier as the peanut gallery, where we were pushed back on by the Water Management District Governing Board, referred to as the peanut gallery. Governor DeSantis came in, eliminated that whole board. There was and then to the funding, where it was record funding, and he has stepped up funding every single year for Everglades restoration. What you kind of have is he got this train that was stalled on the tracks moving. And so once it is moving, it can feel like a little complacent, a little bit like there's less of this fight. But it was honestly because there was less threats. Mm-hmm. That pendulum of Sugar's influence is kind of swinging back now. They're seeing the end of Governor DeSantis' term coming. They're looking at and they're always looking at that long game. And I think with this rock mine, that is these new threats. And it is, once again, I think an opportunity for Governor DeSantis to show that leadership commitment that he has had throughout his administration with this issue. And we haven't heard from him yet, but I do believe that the impact and the threat that project can have on the EAA reservoir, which is what we're talking about here today, is significant. Those concerns of threats are shared by the governor's federal partner, the Army Corps of Engineers, has put out a statement with concerns over the impact that rock mine could have on the EAA reservoir. And so this is a huge opportunity. But to bring that back full circle, back to what this announcement means, the governor's intent has always been to expedite Everglades restoration that was not moving at a fast enough pace. this, and Jess can talk about this, but this wasn't really a surprise to me. This was kind of talked about for years of, is there a way to speed it up if the state took it on? I think, though, what that looks like and the impact of how good it can be, or what issues may lie within that is in the details of it. And that's really Jess's world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because, I mean, all we got was just that graphic statement, and there was a decent amount of, bullet point, the pertinent information. But like you said, these things are so incredibly nuanced, and it sounds like there's a lot of details that we don't quite know yet. But I think, another question we could ask is, what do you think, like I kind of said from my point of view, it's been, a couple years without any major kind of announcements in the Everglades restoration world. And then, Governor DeSantis comes in and kind of drops this on us. What do you think the motivation of the governor to announce this now?
I think I think this is, like Chris already pretty much, I think, answered quite a bit of this, and that was, we're nearing the end of the governor's term. This is one of his legacies, his commitment to funding this. Mm-hmm. And I think, we can sum this up pretty easily for our audience so they understand, what this announcement was all about. And that's, the good news is we're moving the timeline up. Mm-hmm. And, yes, it's very nuanced. I've read through the Memorandum of Understanding, the Memorandum of Agreement multiple times. I've studied it closely. We do have some questions. But overall, the news is good. It's great. We're expediting restoration. This is exactly what he promised and what we wanted. The bad news is we have a real and present threat out there in the rock mine. And that rock mine's moving through the state process right now. It's, DP has found an intent to issue that permit. Mm-hmm. And, one of the things that comes along with in this announcement is state oversight over these projects. Well, if the state is going to be maintaining oversight of these projects, they're responsible for the structural integrity of this reservoir as well as the Army Corps. It's a partnership, 50-50 between the feds and the state. And, being responsible for the structural integrity of that reservoir with a rock mine blasting right next to it, listen, we're already having seepage issues with the C-44 reservoir over in Martin County. The Army Corps is dealing with those. You heard the governor say in that announcement on Friday, they're working through those. They think they're going to get those fixed. There's not a rock mine blasting right next to that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, I use the analogy of, a swimming pool that springs a leak. That's what we're dealing with. That's what we could be dealing with here. No need to be, this is a real and present threat. And, let's not be penny wise, pound foolish on it. I mean, we've got to address this issue right next to our crown jewel of Everglades restoration that's going to, help with the discharges to both coast of Florida.
Yeah, and as far as like what concerns could you have with this announcement? Mm-hmm. One of the things that Jess and I have talked about is these impacts and this effort is going to continue after Governor DeSantis's presence in the governor's mansion in Tallahassee.
Absolutely.
And so what does it mean, and what movement and ability to dictate the pace and speed and what types of projects happen going forward with whoever comes after him. Mm-hmm. And we know without a doubt that, the sugar industry's influence on the legislature in Tallahassee is extremely heavy. They can make a lot of influence and a lot of impact there more difficultly than they can in D.C. And that partnership between Everglades Restoration, between the feds and the state, is two things. One, it is a cost share in this, and in order to get the largest restoration project in the history of our nation executed. But the other part of it is kind of checks and balances to hold each other accountable. And as long as through this process we do not lose that, then that's one of the main concerns. And we want to make sure that whoever it is can't take threats that may come, like this Southland Big Sugar's rock mine proposal that may come in the future, and lump them into this and fast track them through the process as some kind of a beneficial project that will support Everglades restoration, because that's exactly how they're trying to sell this rock mine. And if you look at the very last kind of paragraph in the governor's announcement around that 404 statement, it says it's recognizing that permit review and issuances by the Army under Section 404 of the Clean Water Act can delay projects. The Army's committed to prioritizing the review and issuance of those 404 permits that support federally authorized CERP projects, which would be Everglades restoration, and projects funded under state-led programs that support Everglades restoration and the quality of waters within Lake Okeechobee, including, and then it goes on. But the point here is, if Big Sugar is able to, sell this rock mine as a water resource project, and then go to the state for appropriations to fund that, they're double dipping. They're getting paid with our money to excavate rock, and then they're turning around and selling the rock. That under the designs they've proposed offers zero water quality cleaning ability. But under that, does this then kind of give them the ability to attach a project like that was not sought out by either of the partners in Everglades restoration, the district or the Army Corps? It was proposed unsolicited by the sugar industry to them. And so does it give them the ability to hitch that wagon to Everglades restoration? That's the real concern. And I think that's where the accountability and checks and balances come in. As you see here, this process with this rock mine has moved through the state very, very quickly. Yet the federal partner, the Army Corps of Engineers, is saying, wait a minute, we've got real concerns over this. So that is an important relationship. And expediting and taking over leadership of constructing these projects is great, as long as we don't lose that relationship of the accountability between the two partners.
Yeah, and I think even when I first saw it, and you can explain this, but I think partially if some of our audience is probably thinking, oh, the federal side is completely out of this now. Like, it's only the state doing everything. And it's not, correct? The Army Corps is still involved, but to how much?
Yes. So the Army Corps is still involved. What this memorandum of understanding and the memorandum of agreement agreed to was essentially this. Very simply, the state's able to plug in and use their resources where it benefits expediting these CERP projects. Now, and vice versa, the Army Corps as well, that works the other way as well. So it's still that partnership. They're still working together. The state just has less red tape, so they're able to execute and move faster on some of these things. The issue that Chris just brought up, which was also in the agreement, is that actually pertains to non-CERP projects, which is why it's a little concerning. We're looking at that language. We're somewhat concerned about that language. We're concerned that the rock mine, could fall under that category, and it could be used that way. So, like I said, great news here is this is exactly what we wanted. We want, these projects to be finished expeditiously, and I think that is there is not malintent with that language. I think it's probably just something that someone on the staff overlooked, didn't realize what they were doing, maybe. But we'll see. But I think that's overall, good news, bad news is, like I said, we have a clear and present threat and clear and present danger in the rock mine.
And what the interpretation of that language may be with Governor DeSantis can be one thing. What is the open interpretation that it could be used by someone else?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is that's what happens.
The big thing is we know that the threats historically from the start of Everglades restoration have come from Big Sugar in many forms, and they will not stop. And so every move that is made has to have a calculation of insulating against any of those threats that could come. And therefore, any language needs to be, rock solid, boxed in, that there is no gray. There is no gray area.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think it was just good to clear up that, the federal side of this isn't just like gone completely and it's just the state doing everything now. That's not the case. There still is a partnership. There's just in certain areas trying to expedite timelines because the state doesn't have necessarily the same red tape as the federal side does, which, like we said, is good, but there's a lot of details that we have to figure out. As far as, funding is super important. We do it every single year. We ask the state for money and then we ask the federal side of it. And we know that, Everglades restoration is a 50-50 cost share between the state and the federal government. Does this change? Does the funding change in any way, or is it going to be exactly the same? Is the funding source going to be different? Can we kind of discuss that a little bit?
Sure. That's not completely spelled out in this agreement, to be honest. I have some questions about that. But from what I understand, and this is just my understanding, is that, the state and the federal, since it's a 50-50 cost share, the state builds some projects, CERP projects, the feds build some CERP projects. They each have a ledger going of what they're spending on these projects. So if the state decides it can do a project more expeditiously than the Fed, and they go in, they take it over, and, both the feds and the state agree to the state taking it over, then basically that money comes just as a pass-through to the state. Doesn't go to before the state legislature, anything like that. It's my understanding. Yep. Now, like we said, devil's in the details.
Right.
So the money wouldn't go through the state legislature, which
that's the way we understand it. And again, to Jess's point, the devil's in the details. But the way this works now is like, if the state can move more quickly, they can kind of get ahead on how much they're spending. And that's what's happened. So if you look at it dollar for dollar, the state has spent more money than the Fed. So this enables the state to still move at that pace, or these projects to move at those pace, and bring funding that would normally go just to the Army Corps, and bring that funding to
give it to the state since they're ahead.
Give it to South Florida Water Management District specifically to expedite those projects, but without it getting unbalanced in the funding component from each partner.
Yeah, because I think, my personal concern is why I wanted that cleared up is because, in my opinion, if this funding was with this, state having more capabilities to move up timelines, if that money went through the legislature, that would give me pause, because obviously we know our experience with the state legislature and Sugar's influence there, like we just discussed. If the money was going through the legislature, I could easily see them, holding up that money or funding things like the rock mine instead of the EA reservoir, and completely shifting. Like, they're still using that money, but they're just using it for things that aren't necessarily CERP projects. So that would be probably the concern there.
Yeah, that's one of the things that Jess is going to look into very carefully. But we've identified that, to our knowledge and the information that we've been provided right now, is that it does not pass through the legislature.
It goes straight to the district.
The district spends the money, it comes in and reimburses the district.
Gotcha.
Every year people hear us talk about, we go and ask for funding from the state, from the federal government. What that means is we are asking the legislature or Congress to fund the responsible party in that partnership. So we ask the state legislature to fund the budget of the South Florida Water Management District. we asked Congress to fund the budget of the Army Corps of Engineers around Everglades restoration.
Gotcha.
Sums it up.
Okay, cool. So one of the bullets that I read in the very beginning, I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper on. It's the one at the very end where it says Army expedites funding, cuts red tape, and grants Florida authority to manage Everglades projects. And it's specifically that last line when it says Florida will manage Everglades projects. First of all, when it says Florida, who is that referring to? Is that also the district?
Yes.
Yes.
So it's okay.
Yeah, everything in here, when they say Florida or feds, Florida is referring to their partner as South Florida Water Management District.
Okay. And it's basically giving them, and are they going to manage all of the projects? Because it's a little vague. Grants Florida authority to manage Everglades projects.
The way this is going to work is, this memorandum of understanding sets up like a CERP oversight group, is what it's referred to, and that oversight group is comprised of the Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, the Deputy Commanding General of the Army Corps. So there you have 2 federal officials. It also includes the Secretary of DEP, the Executive Director of the South Florida Water Management District, and a representative designated by the Governor of Florida. So you have 3 state representatives, 2 federal representatives on this CERP oversight group. It lays out how often they convene and the process, that they go through for identifying project components, that maybe, the state could assume and work faster on.
So they'll sit down and the Corps will basically be like, you guys can take these ones. Is it going to be kind of something like, is it going to be all of them? Because it doesn't say.
No, I don't believe it would necessarily be all of them.
It's where they can gain, where they can gain ground.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay, that's good to know. What about do we know the EA reservoir specifically? How is the EA reservoir originally going to be managed and operated, and is that changing now?
So the feds, the Army Corps is responsible for building the embankment, which is the embankment around the reservoir itself, 10,500 acre deep water reservoir, 30-foot embankment, massive reservoir. The state was responsible for building the wetland, the engineered wetland component of that reservoir, which is the cleaning component known as an STA, or stormwater treatment area. So that's a shallow embankment that has aquatic, subaquatic, and aquatic vegetation that take up the pollution, the nutrients in the water, and to grow and then send clean water out. We have a system of those STAs that are cleaning sugars runoff currently from the EAA that are majority taxpayer funded. They're very effective if managed properly. And so the state is responsible for building. Now, granted, it's not as massive as a project. That's 6,500 acres of wetland, and it's only a 5-6 foot, 8-foot berm. It's a shallow water deal, like a few foot deep. We duck hunt in them,
Yeah.
And the state completed that in, it was like under 2 years.
Yeah, that part's done.
So now I think where it is, and regardless, like that bigger project's going to take longer, but I think what we'll see here is there may be, and this again is in the details, there may be components of the reservoir construction that would fall under the Corps that the state can take over to speed up. What we know is the initial components that the state will take over is the supply canals, the canals that will feed the reservoir from Lake Okeechobee, and areas that they're basically adding capacity to move water through those canals. So that may be something that what parts the state takes over and leads on will happen in a little more real time over the next 4 years.
Gotcha.
Is
Okay.
that correct, Jess?
Correct.
All right.
And we kind of discussed this, but we know, obviously expediting the EA reservoir, like that's what we've been wanting. That's why we founded this organization, to stop the harmful discharges. The way we do that is largely with this reservoir. and hearing this news of, oh, the reservoir is going to be done 5 years ahead of time now, like that's huge. And kind of like I said, since I've been involved, anytime there's something that's like way too good to be true, usually it's because it is. Did that happen at any point, or are you already past that where you're like, we know that it's not a perfect scenario, but we're still figuring this out?
No, listen, like I said, I'm say it again. This is great news for expediting the completion of the reservoir. The thing that I think, and we mentioned this in our statement, in the announcement, the thing that we're concerned with here, obviously, in addition to the threats of the rock mine and other threats that we're constantly fighting off all the time. I mean, that's what I spend the majority of my time doing, is, the reservoir, Phillips and Jordan is, they're the ones promoting the rock mine, obviously.
And they're the contractor.
They're the contractor. They're also a contractor who is benefiting from some of these components of these projects that are being completed. So, I think Daniel on another episode referred to it as these are huge, massive contracts that they're making a lot of money on.
I mean, they were just awarded a contract for a section of canal widening at the last governing board meeting for $100 million.
Wow.
Yeah.
Substantial contracts.
Yeah. And so, we've got that, issue that we're in the threat of the rock mine, watching, the issue that they're one of the main contractors benefiting from all this. So that needs a watchdog as well. But also it's how we operate, these projects when they're completed. You talk about how much relief from the discharges. I mean, we haven't had a major discharge event since 2019?
Yeah, almost 7 years.
Yeah, almost 7 years now. So we've had a lot of people move here. All the people that moved here during COVID because of Florida's wanting that freedom here in Florida. But those people haven't experienced what it's like when our economy here in Florida, which is based on tourism, comes to a grinding halt because of bad water quality. And let me be clear, it's not just about water quality here in South Florida. We have these issues and threats all over the state. We have them in the Panhandle. We have them in the Indian River Lagoon. We have them, up in Jacksonville, in the Keys. They're everywhere. We have these, we have significant threats to water quality all over the state. But yeah, how that reservoir is going to be operated, whether it's operated to benefit the sugar industry, whether it's operated to benefit the Everglades and the coastal estuaries so as not to release dirty water on us, dump that dirty water on us. We've still got that process to go through, So
as it stands right now, because we know the sugar industry, sued over the operations of the EA reservoir and lost. So where does it stand now of how it's going to be operated and who's operating it? And is that up for a change now with this new news, or is it?
No, it doesn't look like that. The Corps would still be responsible for operations. And, that fact that we have not had a water crisis here in South Florida for almost 7 years is a testament to the progress that has happened around Everglades restoration. We have more projects online every day. Just last week, the governor was here in South Florida for a ribbon cutting of the C-43 reservoir that will help with providing freshwater flows to the Caloosahatchee in the dry season to help balance salinities and help with some of that local basin runoff. And so we've seen more progress with the ability, the bridging on Tamiami Trail, the 8.5 square mile buffer to where they can raise the water levels and push more water through those bridges into Shark River Slough. We are seeing the impacts. We're also seeing the impacts from those are the infrastructure gains that we've made. We're also seeing the impacts from the management gains and the fact that, there was a multi-year process that the Army Corps went through to develop a new Lake Okeechobee system operation manual on how they manage the lake. And we've seen the reduction in those damaging discharges as a result of that. We've seen more water flowing south as a result of that. And so we are seeing that as more capacity comes online and available to those water managers, we'll see incremental benefit. And that's why expediting those, you can only manage so much benefit to the capacity of infrastructure that you have. Mm-hmm. So the limiting factor is how fast we get infrastructure available to the managers, then they can tweak. And so, after we went through that LOSUM process, after this reservoir is complete, there will be such a massive more amount of capacity within the system that they will, in essence, likely go through a new Lake Okeechobee system operating process,
right,
to manage water now with this new tool in the toolbox.
Yeah. Can't wait to do that again. Another 4 years of we talked about LOSUM for so long.
I will say there is a balance of moving too slow and too much red tape and moving too quickly without enough oversight and enough gone into it. And the thing about Everglades restoration projects is they are studied and modeled extensively. Mm-hmm. There is hundreds of scientists and ecologists and engineers that put their eyes on these plans. That's the concern with this rock mine that they're pushing, is it does not go through those same checks and balances and processes. It's being painted as something that would support Everglades restoration. It's just like an Everglades restoration project, except for the fact that the only people that have studied it is the contractor that is hired by the sugar industry to solicit the proposal that stands to make, $800 million off the rock alone. It's so, it's you want to make sure that you are not doing anything, even with good intentions now, that can have negative consequences down the road. You've heard us say it many, many times over the years. Everglades restoration is necessary because 100 years ago, a bunch of people thought it was a good idea to drain a worthless swamp. Mm-hmm. Now we're dealing with those consequences. It's the same reason why we've opposed aquifer storage and recovery wells that would take surface water from Lake Okeechobee and inject it into the drinking water aquifer to store it with the intent that they could pull it out later. That's something that people have come up with as a good tool with intent. What negative consequences could that have? Would we be here 50 years from now going, well, shit, now we've...
Yeah, remember when we injected the water into the ground?
Bad news, guys. We've contaminated the drinking water aquifer, or we've fractured the drinking water aquifer because of pumping water in and sucking water out, and now it's leaking and migrating to other areas. It's causing sink. Who knows? But we better be damn sure that any action taken is not going to cause a negative reaction that was an unforeseen consequence.
Yeah.
Amen, brother.
Yeah. So, I mean, we could wrap this up. I think the high level takeaway here is, like Jess said, this is great news. We're moving up timelines, but this comes with the devil's in the details. Like we keep saying, the operations, what is that going to look like? That's the critical, important pieces that are highly nuanced and that I'm sure we will figure out as time passes. But it is big news. We want these projects to come online quicker so we can get to our goal faster. And that's good. But, we just have to keep an eye on specifically, the operations of all of this and how that's all going to play out. And we'll obviously keep our listeners up to date. But I kind of want to close out, and bring us back to our first question here. But let's say when the governor listens to this, because he always listens to our podcasts. But what would you say to him right now?
You want me to go for this, Chris? You want to go for this?
Take a stab. I'll
say
what I think afterwards.
Okay. Dude, we need you.
Bro.
Bro.
Where are you at?
The rock mine. Now that going back to it, good news, expediting this. Bad news, there's still clear and present danger with the rock mine. and it is making its way through the governor's DEP. They have issued a notice of intent to issue the permit for this rock mine.
There's not many more steps.
Exactly. Not putting the genie back in the bottle after this. We need you to look at this, and we need you to intervene and do something. We need you to jump in and say, this is not, if we're not going to advance a project that is a threat to the one crown jewel project that's going to keep us, that's going to keep us safe on both coasts and keep us from having those discharges again like we experienced in 2019.
Yeah, I would first say, if Governor DeSantis is listening, which I'm sure he is, I would say thank you for your leadership, for the funding, for the movement that has been made in Everglades restoration. I do not doubt his commitment. From the first time I met with Governor DeSantis in Washington, D.C., in the Capitol, where he came off the floor to meet with us before he had even announced a run for governor, his commitment to this issue was clear. It's remained clear. And what I would say to him is, you've got here this project that, in his own words, is the crown jewel of Everglades restoration, that he is doing everything he can to move forward as quickly as possible because he understands the value and impact that project will have on Florida's constituents and Florida's residents. And the fact that this rock mine would go on for 30 or 40 years poses even a greater threat because you're not blasting rock while the EAA reservoir is under construction. You will be blasting rock once the EAA reservoir is completed. Mm-hmm. And so that poses a lot higher structural threat that could jeopardize the integrity of that reservoir. And what I would just say to him is that, this all of the good that has been achieved through his efforts, through the funding, through the attention, can be at stake with one falter, one slip.
Yep.
And this threat is real. The governor has stepped in and saved Everglades restoration before. We saw him do that with Senate Bill 2508. We saw him do that with the replacing of the South Florida Water Management District Board and terminating those leases that the previous board had put in place. We've seen him save this before, and I think this is another time when we need him to step in and save it again. The governor needs to direct DEP not to issue that permit until this proposal can go through a very thorough vetting process by both the South Florida Water Management District and the state's partner at the Army Corps of Engineers to determine, one, if it actually brings any real benefit and value to Everglades restoration or to our water, and two, what types of threats it carries with it. And any threat to the Everglades agricultural area reservoir, the Everglades reservoir, is unacceptable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like his legacy has been Everglades restoration, this EA reservoir, and it's at stake now with this rock mine. So that'd be fantastic. If you're listening, let's get rid of this rock mine, please. But I think that's good today. I think we definitely, answered some of the questions, I saw on our socials, and just in general. It was a little confusing, this news of, the state takeover, and obviously there's a lot of nuances. So thank you guys for coming in and discussing it, and we'll catch you guys next time.